My name is Marc Flayton. I was born on November 27th, 1952. I am presently in Myrtle Beach, and I live with Marsha Foreman, who's my friend and housemate. I want to first read to you something that I found that would help everybody understand something that is in Lord Mayher, the biography of Avatar of the Mayher Baba, Volume 11 and Volume 12, 1952 to 1954. It's, uh, it, it's very interesting. Okay, I'm going to start off now. There is an advantage, this is Mayher Baba. Baba commented, there is an advantage in approaching a wali and also a disadvantage at times. But there is no question of loss or gain in approaching me. Still, when my will manifests, all will be blessed automatically. The whole world will be blessed, and God will do it 100%. Alaba asked, when will you break your silence? Baba smiled and spelled out, after 1,200 years, when God makes me speak, I will speak, and it will be the word that I utter, the true talk. Buddha, Krishna, and Christ have gone after saying something, and so will I after speaking something. But when I speak, God will not make me speak all this. Whatever I say now is already written in books, and it is all repetition. Only when God makes me speak will he express and prove his godhood through me, but that is quite a different matter. Go on to the next page. Baba says, once in a cycle, it could be 1,000,000,000 years, it could be 700 years, I don't know. I'm not sure what kind of cycle he's talking about. That's me. But once in a cycle, God does this. It depends on his whim. But when God makes me speak, my speaking will be proof. It is quite true that my work is universal in nature, and every saint, wali, and lover will help in it 100%. God will do all this, and I am looking forward to the time. I am keenly waiting for it. I only know that God will make me speak. When I utter the word, God's existence will be proved, and for that to be done, the help of mass, saints, and walis is essential. I am taking their help. Pendu interjected, Baba knows the time, still he is looking forward to it. I know one thing, Baba replied, and that is God will make me break my silence. It will not be that speech as we speak now. When I open my mouth, God will be proved, and for that I get assistance from saints and mosques. To explain to you, to make you understand, I must speak. I will definitely speak and manifest myself. God will, Godhood will be proved thereafter. I have never said this so openly before or explained it so clearly. J. Baba. Hello, folks. I am going to tell you some stories. When I was young, maybe 16 or 17, I started reading Aldous Huxley's autobiography. And in his autobiography, he, 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 he said one thing in one chapter that really touched me. He said, I want to know everything. And, you know, it sort of made me feel connected to him, very connected to him. So I studied him. I didn't like his taking of LSD or anything like that. I think that was personal to him. But I liked his books and everything like that. He was a really nice, intelligent man. So, you know, coming up upon 18, 19, I lived in Queens in Jamaica. And there was a master. The only way I knew that is there was a restaurant called Anam Brahma, which was owned by a guy named Mahavishnu, who's a guitar player, and his wife. And they owned this restaurant, and I went in there. I saw this beautiful woman standing there. I said, I got to get near her. I got to be So I got a job there. I got a job working in Anand Brahma, carrying stuff to the table, being a busboy, and I got to know them pretty good. But I was kind of young. I was 17, you know. So anyway, I was testing the waters. So next one, I became a disciple of Sri Chinmoy. He was a master from India. He was in Sri Aurobindo's ashram at Pondicherry. But I mean, there was a group of people in Jamaica, Queens, that followed him, and I got into it. I got a haircut. I had long hair. I got a haircut, and I sat at his feet. But I also sat at other people's feet, like Swami Satchidananda, and he was a very nice guy. On my right was Peter Max was sitting there. Coltrane's wife was there. There was a lot of people at the time who were well known in the world who were coming towards spirituality on a certain level. But to be honest with you, Sri Chinmoy and Swami Satchidananda were all part of, to me, a spiritual discipline that I couldn't get into. I couldn't get into an ashram life. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into wearing the same clothes and looking the same way. I got into TM, but I just couldn't get into it. So I was speaking to my friend Ira Shader, who I was friends with. Stephen, I forget his name, but Ira Shader and his group of pirates, of crazy people. Anyway, Ira said to me, go down to the center. Go down to Meher Baba's center. I knew of Meher Baba for years because I used to go to this restaurant called Paradox in the Village, and Jerry Watson had hung big pictures of Meher Baba everywhere in the restaurant. I mean, you couldn't miss these pictures of Meher Baba. You just couldn't miss them. So I knew about Meher Baba. I was also at the Woodstock Festival, and there was pictures of Meher Baba all over the place. But anyway, I wasn't a disciple, so to say, or I wasn't attracted only to him. But when I went down to the center, I had an experience. I was there for a couple of days. I was there for, I think, 10 days. And the first couple of days, I wasn't getting it. And then I went off the center. You're supposed to be back on the center by, I think, at the time was 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. And this was in 1973. So I had left the center, went to a lady's house. I thought we were going to sit and talk about Meher Baba. It wasn't to be. I said to her I had better leave now. And my flashlight, which was out of batteries, was giving me a hard time. So I left anyway. I said, I got to go. So I left, and I had to walk from 17 all the way to the center to the kitchen through the woods. I mean, it was like the first time in my life I ever experienced a plethora of like animal noises and things. I was scared. I was personally scared. But I got up the courage, and then something hit me. And I laid down, and I nearly fainted, and some huge amount of love entered my body. And as a result, I got up and I was in a total state of bliss. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, where am I? Who's this Meher Baba? I mean, I had spoken with Elizabeth and with Kitty and all that, but this was like the strike of strikes. This is where you get hit over the head by Baba. And you know who he is and everything like that. So I went to the original kitchen, and one of the guys, who was from Queens, looked at me in the eyes and says, "Oh, you've got it. You're now with Baba," because a couple of days before that, he looked at me and said, you don't feel it yet, do you? I mean, it was just a friend for Queen, but this time he said, "Oh, you're with Baba." So that was my experience. From then on, I was with Baba. I got a job next at Mayher of India, working for James Cox, and it was an incredible amount of Baba lovers coming through that place. In other words, it was like all these Mandali came there because James was like the purpose of the company was to build a pilgrim center in India. That was the purpose of the profits from the company. He was building the pilgrim center, and Ted Judson, who one thing about Ted Judson, he came up there, before he went to India, and he had maybe he was in India once, but he came up there with his guitar on his back, and also Heather and what was Heather? Erica came through. I mean, it was a place for people to come through, and Erica and Heather were playing flutes and walking barefoot through New York City. That's how early this was. This was like in 73, 74. And Ted, the interesting thing I had connection with Ted, although I never spoke to him about it, he had a model of what the Pilgrim Center should look like. So he's sitting there at James Cox's desk with the model of the Pilgrim Center. This is the first Pilgrim Center. I know they built a second one. But he said, I don't know what I need. And it was HO model. HO is a certain type of measurement. HO trains, So I said, I have stuff at home from that would help you. So I brought him a box of grass that I had from I had model trains. So I brought him a box of grass that he used on the Pilgrim Center, and that's what it was like working at Mayher of India. I mean, Pukar was there when he came to America. He was sitting there in the waiting room in his sadra and writing songs and singing, and people like, Adi came through and others. All the Mandali that came to America came through James Cox because they were put up by him, to stay at his farm or somebody's house, but they wanted to see what this place was like. This guy who was building the Pilgrim Center, they wanted to get an idea of what Mayher of India was like. So it was a non-stop procession of Mandali and Phyllis Fredericks. I can keep naming them, but they all came through. But I was working there, so I had to work. I was in charge of shipping and receiving, and so I had to ship out the stuff, receive the goods, and they were all Indian material shirts, but they were styled. So our biggest customers were Bloomingdale's and big stores. It wasn't like Indian style, but they were Indian fabrics. It was very successful. So anyway, I worked with a guy named Hugh Rosenthal I was very close to. He was my partner in crime. And from there, I spent 4 years in bliss, really, in bliss working there. But anyway, so I want to follow that up with the story of this rock. I had a nervous breakdown, a really bad nervous breakdown. And I was being treated for it by a doctor, by a psychiatrist, and I was in very bad shape. He was not doing me well and everything. But I heard that Adi Kearani and Jack Small, who I worked with, because, when you I worked with Jack Small to get him stuff in India. Every people come and go to India, but they have to bring stuff with them. In those days, you had to bring typewriters and things like that with you for the people there, because they didn't have that stuff there. So it had to come from America or other places. So I was working a lot with Jack Small. Anyway, I heard that Adi, and I knew Jack Small was his companion, and they were at WBAI Studios, and that's where Lex Hickson worked, in the Spirit. That was a show, In the Spirit, and he had a wonderful show on Sunday. Anyway, so the story of this rock, this is rose quartz. Rose, it was redder. It was more rose quartz when I first got it. But the story of this rock was interesting. I was being treated, being put on all kind of drugs. I was in bad shape, but I was very depressed. These drugs can that the doctors, the psychiatrists give you, can depress the hell out of you. So I was very depressed one day, and when I was a child of like 4 or 5 years old, I went to a beautiful forest which was near my house in Queens. It was an area that was just being built up, and there was what they call a virgin forest with pieces of rose quartz that were the size this big, and this shape, and there's all over the place, trees and big piece of rose quartz. And I had a relationship with rose quartz for some reason, and I just like, I flipped out. It was like being home. So anyway, so I said, you know what will help me? Finding rose quartz in the forest. So I went to the local forest. I was living near Cunningham Park at the time, and Cunningham Park had some forest. So I went into Cunningham Park and figured if I find some rose quartz, that will make me happy, because it will it will connect me to my childhood. So I was looking for rose quartz, and it was not to be. There was white quartz, which was industrial quartz. It's like the stuff you see on driveways and the stuff they put on driveways. They don't put rose quartz on driveways. Anyway, I was very depressed. But I said, I'm going to make it to see Adi. Even though I was barely, I was young, but I was barely limping. That's how these drugs they put me on, and on a fast of water. I was tremendously under the water. Anyway, so I get to see Adi, and at the end, I'm outside, and Jack Small reaches into his satchel, and he pulls out this rock of rose quartz, and he says to me, I brought you something from the tomb. This is from the tomb. And it was a piece of rose quartz. And it made me so happy. It got me through all these periods, because I knew that it was from Meher Baba. I'm going to tell you about my crazy experiences of Meher Baba. I had some unbelievable experiences. One time I was blind in my left eye, totally blind. For a year, for 2 years, I was blind in my left eye. And Bao was staying on the center. I always went there when he was staying on the center. And he said something like, when I leave, when I go back to India, I take a lot of the sanskaras that are here. I said, wow. So I'm sitting in my house in Chapel Hill after I went to the center, because I lived in Chapel Hill with my wife and son. And I had a room upstairs, a meditation room. And it was a picture of the Pravadagar prayer, and I always said the Pravadagar prayer. Anyway, I got the exact time that Bao was getting on the plane to go to India. And I said, I'm going to try this. With Baba, all you can do is try things. You can't be sure anything's going to happen. It's all in his hands and in the hands of the hierarchy. Anyway, I sat there, and suddenly I'm looking at the Pravadagar prayer, and fire fire is burning the lines of the Pravardagar prayer, one line after another. A line of fire is burning the words. And when it got to the last word, my sight returned in my left eye. That's a true story. That's a God's honest, true story. Exactly happened the way I described it. And then another time, our house in Chapel Hill burned down. You know, it burned to the ground. And we were on vacation on Emerald Isle in North Carolina. And we got a call that your house was on fire and you better come home. So we came home and we walked in the house. I mean, it was still standing basically, but who was there was the insurance man and the construction guy, and everything was thrown out the back of the house. Everything was in a pile about 10 feet high, and it's at night, and me and my wife and son are standing there, and we're all looking out, and I see Baba sitting right on top of that pile, sitting there right on top of that pile. And so I said to him, you know, Bob, it's not funny. It's not funny. But he had that smile on his face where, you know, he was always happy. You know, I said, this is not funny. This is not fun. But anyway, that was an experience, you know what I mean? And then I had another experience where, listen to this, you're going to like this. We had the twins at our house for a party, you know what I mean? And big party, a lot of people from Chapel Hill, everybody there. So I decided to go out for a walk for some fresh air. This is very funny. And I went outside, and guess what? The house was like 6 or 7 or 8 feet off the ground. It was sitting there up in the air, the house. And anyway, that was my experience. And another experience with the twins, Tony Grist took me to the airport to meet them when they were coming in.
These are Baba's nephews, say.
Oh, the twins are Baba's nephews. Yeah, Rustam and Sarab. And Tony Grist took me to the airport, and he says, watch this. And when they come through the door, and I didn't know what he was talking about, but as they were coming through the door, the room was full of rainbows. They were cleaning up the sanskaras in the room. And me and Tony were standing there looking at this like, what the hell? You know, it was like that. It was like that. And then I got another experience, a great experience. Baba's wrote the biography. Not Baba wrote it, but Baba had it written by one of his early disciples of Upasni Maharaj. Okay? And it was coming out in English, and it was coming from a place in Chicago where giving it out to the public. And so I called up the person I said, I want this, a copy. You got to send me one. I really want this. So I paid for it. You know, I guess it was sent out or something. I don't know. But I had a dream in like 2 days, a dream of Baba coming and handing me the Upasni Maharaj's biography. And it came the next day in the mail. I mean, it was, and I know it was Baba because his hands were so beautiful, you know, and it was Baba's face, and oh, it was incredible, incredible. And let me tell you, I had, you know, some of you might not like the Sufis, but I had a relationship with James Mackay and the next Murshida, who was Carol Connor. And I went out. I was with Jane helping when Bob Brown was dying. He was a friend of mine from New York, and Jane was very close to Jane. And I used to come down to Myrtle Beach to be with Bob and Jane when Bob was getting really sick. And this is a great story. This is a great story. And Bob was laying in bed and he was dying. I mean, it was over. We all pitched in and tried to help him do whatever he was doing with needles and all these things to live longer, but it was the end. But he was breathing. I mean, it was everyone was coming through the room, saying goodbye to Bob and everything. And let me tell you what I saw. At the end of his bed, I'll never forget this. There were colors and people and saints and kings and queens waiting for him, waiting for him. Nobody else saw it, or else they would have said something. I stared at it. I couldn't believe. I mean, Bob Brown. I mean, good buddy and everything like that. But I mean, the colors, the people, the people waiting for him. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. You just wouldn't believe it. It was so beautiful. It was so heavenly. You know. Anyway, that story I had to tell because it was a beautiful, beautiful experience, and yeah, it was a beautiful. Bob was a great friend, great guy. I mean, I didn't work on the center. I wasn't close to him in that way, but I knew him from New York. When Jane was in New York, I was close to him, and he did a lot of beautiful framing. I mean, he did all the frames on the center. I mean, I think not all of them, but most of them. He was a very talented guy. Anyway, that's all. That's all I want to say. You know, I mean, I've had a lot of other experiences too, but I just can't remember them now. But anyway, it's not the experiences of Mayor Baba that really helped me. It was an odd feeling of not knowing who I was or what I was that attracted me to him in the first place. I mean, I didn't know who I was. I mean, you look at people, you think they know who they are. Their egos are strong. It's good to have a strong ego. You know, of course, it's the ego's on the top layer, and below it is where all the work gets done. But you need somebody to protect you, and I just didn't have that protection. I never spoke to my father, my mother. You know, I never spoke to anybody in my life who can guide me, who was able to guide. My father was very silent, and that's the guy you need to speak to when you're very young. So I didn't have that. I didn't have any guidance at all in my life. So I didn't know I didn't know who was in here. It was like an empty shell. And that's why I became so in search for somebody to give me some reason for existence. Not that I was suicidal or anything, but just a reason to exist. And it turned out that Mayor Baba, of all these people, fit the bill. So J Baba.